Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're going to do something to get to know me better, because since the start of the channel, a couple of new people have been joining, a couple of people have been leaving, but I thought we're going to take the opportunity to get to know each other a little better, or at least you get to know me a little better. So I happened to see this new tag over on the channel. My name is Marinette, who is, by the way, a great booktuber. You should check out her channel. And over there, she introduced, along with French, introduced this new tag. Because whatever happened to tags? I actually, back on my very, very old first channel, I used to do book tags all the time. I loved them. And Marinette came up, together with a friend, came up with this new tag, which is here to help us get to know each other a little more, so you get to know what my reading tastes are, because if you're like me, you might also sometimes have trouble finding people online, especially here on BookTube, where there are so many wonderful creators. You maybe have some trouble sometimes finding some people who actually do have the same taste in books that you have. So this is what this tag is for. It consists of 15 questions that are here to basically for me to ramble about books I like. So you get to know me as a reader, what kind of books I prefer to read, how my rating system works, how my review style works. So that's what those questions are for. Obviously, you're welcome to do the tag as well yourself in the comments or on the channel. I'm also going to leave a link in the description down below to a playlist where people have been doing the tag as well. But that's it for the introduction. Let's jump into it. Question number 1. How do you rate books? Give a quick rundown of how you do your star ratings, or if you don't use star ratings, how you evaluate books. Okay, so I do use star ratings for my reviews, and I tend to go by the story graph scale, if you can say that, which is basically from 1 to 5 with quarter steps in between. So often, especially if you read my written reviews on Storygraph or on Goodreads, you will see me that I used, 3.25, 4.5, 2.75. I will use stuff like that. But in general, I do operate within the 1 to 5 star scale, especially also on Goodreads, who still don't allow quarter stars for some reason. So I do operate within this general understanding, I think, of the star rating system. And how it works for me is 1 star is honestly bottom of the barrel. I absolutely hated that book. There was nothing positive for me in that reading experience. I would not recommend this book to anyone. There might have even been some problematic stuff about it. Just in general, god awful, would not recommend to anyone. Please do not touch that book. Then 2 stars, if we get into the 2-star range, is I have way more negative things to say about the book than I have good things to say about it. The difference between 1 and 2 stars is that with 2 stars, I can at least name like 1 or maybe 2 aspects of the book that I did somewhat enjoy, or that I can see other people liking about the book. It's still overall not a good reading experience. I probably still wouldn't really recommend that book to anyone if I gave it 2 stars. However, there have at least been some elements to it where I can be like, okay, it's bad, but it's like not at least a total garbage fire. Then we get into the 3-star range. 3 stars is okay. 3 stars is pretty much in the middle. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It's just mid. It's okay. I have some good things to say about it, but I also have some negative things to say about it. Overall, it wasn't like a totally horrendous reading experience, but it also is probably not gonna like stick with me after I finish the book. 3-star books I would potentially recommend depending on who I'm talking to or what the other person is into. 3 stars do have the potential to be better. However, I could also see that 3 stars for some other people have the potential to be even worse, so it's very much in the middle. And we get into 4-star range. 4 stars is really, oh hey, that was really a lot of fun. I have way more good things to say about the book than I have negative things to say about the book. So basically the polar opposite of 2 stars, basically. So 4 stars really means, oh hey, I had fun with this, there was some really cool elements to it, I liked the characters, I had an overall really enjoyable reading experience. However, there are still elements to the book that were negative for me, that were noticeably negative, that where I would say, oh no, that actually I didn't like that, or that's a flaw. So it's not close, it's not perfect, but it's still very much enjoyable, and I would recommend a 4-star book. If we get into 5-star range, I very rarely give pure 5-star a pure 5-star rating. You will, if I do really happen to enjoy a book like a lot, you will often see me give 4.5 or even 4.75. It has to be a really damn good reading experience for me to give a book 5 stars, because 5 stars for me means this is special. This is, to me, one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It's a book I've genuinely enjoyed, that I had fun reading the whole way through, that I was really looking forward to coming back to reading whenever I paused it. A book that just really sticks with me, a book that had good pace and had great characters, a good plot, just a book that really, really sticks with me and honestly makes me feel something. A 4-star book also makes me feel something, but a 5-star read basically has like this special something. It has like this special something that makes me go, okay, no, this feels really, really special. And that doesn't happen that often. And basically like the half or quarter stars I use are basically for me to just sort of differentiate, because I tend to lean sometimes between certain star ratings, and then it's just really a question of a feeling, that sometimes, okay, it's not quite a 5, but it's still not a 4. It's better than a 4, so maybe it's a 4.5, because it's really close to being good, to like being the best, but not quite. It's that kind of feeling. So that's what I use the quarter stars for. Question 2. How do you approach reviewing books? What's your review style? Are you analytical, emotional, casual, or structured? Okay, so I'm everything but structured, basically. I'm almost everything else on like the example list here, but I'm not structured. I would say it's mostly casual, especially my written reviews over on Goodreads or Storygraph. If you read those, they are mostly casual. Like, the only structure it has is that I'm trying to be like, okay, now I'm going to talk about the story, now I'm going to talk about the characters, now I'm going to talk about plot development. That's it. But that's not really, I didn't really put that much thought into it. Like, especially if I write, it's just like casual writing. I'm writing down my feelings, what I thought about the book, just my opinions out on the page, so to speak. And when I do book reviews for you here online, if it's like a short book review in a reading wrap-up month or something, it's mostly really just casual. It's me just giving my general impressions on the book for 5 minutes. I'm not really like structuring it beforehand. In case you couldn't tell, none of these videos are structured anyway. I don't write a script or anything. I'm just sitting in front of the camera talking to you about books I happen to like or dislike. And that it pretty much works this way for my book reviews as well. For the bigger book reviews that I do that are like several hours long, I don't really do that much pre-planning. I'm really just using my notes that I wrote down as I was reading a book, and that's basically the structure. Because I'm doing chapter by chapter recaps / reviews. However, I would argue that especially with like those deep dive reviews that last for several hours, I do tend to be very analytical. I do actually try to like see if I can find some themes, some topics that I want to talk about. If I notice any patterns, I tend to do it a lot for books that I know that I will talk about on the channel. If I read sort of like leisurely in my own spare time, I tend to be less analytical, I think, but still, I think somewhat analytical, because I just have that in the back of my mind, also because I have a degree in English, so I think that just stuck at some point, that it's analytical to some degree, but I think overall it's mostly casual and maybe a bit emotional, because if I do really like a book, I do get emotional. If I really hate a book, I'm also gonna get emotional. But I would say overall it's like a mix between like casual with like a hint of analytical, depending on where and when or what book I'm talking about. Question number 3. What's the book that made you a reader? Whether it was your first favorite or the one that got you hooked, what book started it all? Okay, so I have been a reader since about the age of, I would argue 10 maybe, 10 or 11. I did read books when I was quite young as well, but only like now and then. And I only really got into reading when I was around 10 or 11 years old. And that was because I was gifted the book Inkheart. So Inkheart is a middle grade / YA fantasy book by a German author. I actually have that's the German copy with the movie poster on it, actually. So that's my German copy I have of that book. And this book just really got me as a kid, because this is a book about books. So for those who don't know, Inkheart is a story about a young girl, Maggie, and her father. And they get suddenly wrapped up in this mysterious topic of that who's the father, he seems to be hiding something about about their family life. And something happened to them when Maggie was still a child, because their mother left. They never really knew what happened to her, and then suddenly they get kidnapped by someone in the middle of the night, and then it's revealed that all of those mysterious happenings are related to a book named Inkheart. And it seems like the world of the book has bled over into the real world. So I love that there is like this meta aspect to it. So the world of Inkheart becomes real in our world, so to speak. So characters from Inkheart suddenly start appearing in our world, and it's all about that. There's this magic ability that if you start reading books out loud, the characters or the world of that book become real. And I just love that as a child, because it was a book purely about books. It was a book about fantasy and fairy tale worlds becoming real. And it just gave me a love of reading, because that's what the book was about. It was about the love of reading, that Maggie is a child who loves to read, and that her father, Mo, is like a book binder. He binds books, and he always read stories to her, and then suddenly those stories become real. And it's very much fairy tale-esque. And it's the first book in the series, and as the series goes on, it becomes even more like, gets deeper into the lore of the Inkheart world, about all the fairy tales that and the characters that come from that fantasy world, what happens to them, what is that world in the book actually like. And it becomes even like darker and darker as the story goes on. You grow up with Maggie alongside her as you discover the story. And that story just really got me as a kid, and it got me into reading. I just love that book so much, and I would like watch the movie, listen to the soundtracks, got my hands on the entire series. And it was just that book that really gave me this idea as a child to be like, oh wow, books are actually like really cool and so fantastical. And I was like, oh my god, there's so much stuff I can imagine just by reading books. So yeah, Inkheart was responsible for that. Question number 4. Do you have a genre niche? Are there certain genres you gravitate towards? Or do you read wildly across genres? I would argue that I read wildly across genres. Of course, there are genres that I tend to read more than others. I would argue my most popular genres are definitely fantasy. Anything that's sort of fantastical in any way, I really love to read. Like, for example, Inkheart is a fantasy book as well. So fantasy, then I would argue just litfic. I've been really getting into litfic in the past couple of years. And then definitely comics and mangas as well. There's like my comic manga shelf over here. You can sometimes see. I've been reading manga since I was a teenager, so I started out with like One Piece, Dragon Ball, stuff like that, and that's stuck with me up until now. Then definitely classic literature as well. I've been into classic literature like since my school days, and again, I studied English, so I think it's a given that you have to like classic literature for that. So, Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, Sherlock Holmes, all that stuff is absolutely my thing. I especially love 19th century and Victorian literature, in case you didn't know that yet. And, especially like this classic like Gothic literature, Frankenstein and all that. I love that. And then maybe queer lit, I would highlight as well, like queer literature, definitely as someone who is queer. I'm always on the lookout for queer books, especially ace books, as some of you probably know. I'm an ace guy, and always on the lookout for ace representation in books. So those are sort of the genres I read the most, but I would argue that I'm reading as broadly as I can. I've also been trying to get into genres that I didn't I didn't read as much when I was younger. So for example, over the past like 2 years or so, I've been trying to get more into nonfiction. I've been trying to read more nonfiction books about topics that I find interesting. Also biographies. I've been really getting into biographies since like a year or two. So potentially I'm interested in almost everything. As long as it's interesting, I'll take a look at it. Question number 5. Do you generally prefer character-driven or plot-driven stories? Oh, that's difficult. That is difficult. Obviously the best book would be a book that combines both great characters and a great story, and they both support each other. Of course, that would be the best case scenario. I would, like, if it came down to it, I would probably tend towards story-driven books a bit more, because sometimes character-driven stories or character-driven books can be a little too slow and boring for my taste. Depends though. So I would say I maybe have a tendency towards story-driven books a bit more, but honestly depends, because if the characters are really, really great, like great characters can carry a boring story, for example. So it honestly really depends, but if I had to make a choice, I would probably say I tend towards story-driven books a tad more. Question number 6. What's a book you love so much that you don't care if others don't like it? What's that one book you love enough for everyone? Okay, so this is for a book where I'm like, okay, I don't care if other people don't like it as much as I do. I will love it for everyone. We'll talk about it, and I love getting into it, even though you might not be as interested in it. I'm gonna choose something that it seems obvious and maybe not the right choice for this, but it's the one that immediately came to my mind. Hamlet. I have to go with Hamlet. Hamlet is my favorite play of all time. So like I said, I love classic literature and I love Shakespeare, and Hamlet is just very dear to me. It's one of my, like I said, the favorite play I've ever read. I think it's just such an amazing story, and I know that people tend to struggle with Shakespeare, and I know that people tend to struggle especially with Hamlet. It's Shakespeare's longest play. There's so many characters. Some elements of it are a bit questionable. Some of them can be a bit boring. I know, but honestly, I don't care. I love Hamlet so much. I could go on about the characters and the stories and the themes for hours. Even the people who might not like it as much as I do, I don't care. I can love it enough for everyone. And even though I know people are struggling with this, this is like the one play where I always be like, or the one Shakespeare play that I will always sort of defend, where I'm like, oh no, it's actually really cool. I get it, you don't like it, it's a bit boring, but I just love this so much, and I could go on about it for hours. Okay, for question number 7, it's the opposite. What's a book you love so much that if someone doesn't like it, you know your reading tastes don't align? So the book or books where a difference of opinion is a strong indicator of different reading preferences. So for this one, I have 2. The first one is gonna be really obvious because I'm a fantasy reader, and what's the one fantasy book or fantasy series that is arguably one of the best of all time? Lord of the Rings. If you have read Lord of the Rings and you tell me you hate this book, same goes for the movies, by the way, I'm sorry, we can't be friends. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, maybe we can be friends, but we probably won't get along in terms of like our reading tastes, because this is just, to me, genuinely the best fantasy series I've ever read. There's just so much I love about these 3 books. The characters are so wonderfully detailed. They make me feel things. They make me cry. They make me angry. And they are stuck in this fantastical world that is filled with so much attention to detail and love and passion that Tolkien put into this, where you always find something new every time you read these books. And then, of course, the story being like this epic story of defeating this big evil as you join your friends, as you lose friends, as you try to overcome hardships together. It's just so good. And especially as a fantasy fan, if you've read these and you tell me you don't like them, I'm sorry, but I'm out, and I think a lot of people will agree with me on that. However, I do have a second choice here, which is a tad more personal to me. Sherlock Holmes. Friends, if you've been on my channel, watched some of my other stuff, you know this is the man, the myth, the legend that I will do everything for. Sherlock Holmes is arguably, my absolute favorite fictional character of all time. And if you have read the Sherlock Holmes stories and tell me you do not like them or the Sherlock Holmes character, someone might commit a crime. I'm not saying it's me. But yeah, the Sherlock Holmes is so personal to me. I literally wrote my bachelor thesis about Sherlock Holmes. And I know I haven't done it in a while, but you know, on the channel I have Baker Street Reviews where I review adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, which no, I haven't forgotten about. I know it's been on hiatus, but a new episode is gonna come out soon. I promise. And I just love Sherlock Holmes so much. It's like the archetype of all detective stories in the world, and I love detective stories so much, and this is just the root of it all. And I just love Sherlock Holmes as a character and his friendship with Dr. Watson, and I love seeing them solving cases that this just combines everything I like. You know, it's Victorian literature, classic detective stories, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, dynamic duo solving cases, and this very interesting, charismatic, almost exotic kind of character. Just love it. And if you tell me you've read these stories or some of these stories and you're like, I don't get why he's so famous, then we can't. No, I'm sorry, but no, then I guess we're not meant to be. Number 8, what's in your trash pocket? So what books, tropes, or themes that you know are bad, but you love them anyway? So this is about, you know, some people would maybe call this guilty pleasures, which is a term I personally don't really like all that much, but it's like about, you know, stuff where, you know, yeah, it's actually, like, objectively speaking, it's bad and not that good probably, but you love it anyway, because it just makes you feel nice and cozy or something. And I wasn't quite sure what to choose, but then I looked into my manga shelf, and I'm not completely up to date, but I went with this series. The brutal manga series. Because this series, it's not particularly good, but it's very satisfying to read. Because all this series does, it's about this man who is a dark but sexy, handsome psychopath who works for the police, and what he does is exact revenge upon people who did really shitty things. So because of his work as a policeman, he runs into some very gruesome cases, and he finds out what those horrible people, what kinds of horrible crimes they committed, and then he goes and finds them, and then he murders them in a very horrible but satisfying fashion. And that's it. That's basically this entire shtick up until now. There hasn't really been that much different in those 4 volumes I've read so far. But it's weirdly satisfying to read. Again, I know it's not good. It's not unique. It's not creative. There's way over the top ultra violence that's often not necessary. But, you know, it's like revenge porn. You just love seeing these people get their comeuppance and then get murdered in horrible fashion. I'm not saying it's good, and it's very over the top and arguably maybe unnecessarily violent. But I don't know, like it's weirdly not calming, but it's weirdly comforting. I don't know, to read, I guess. Like, I know it's not that good, but it feels like a casual read that I can jump into at any time whenever I get a new volume of this series. So that's my pick for this question. Number 9, do you have any deal breakers in books? Something that, if present, immediately turns you off from a book. Difficult, because I don't DNF books, which I would argue is a flaw of mine. I should really learn how to DNF books. We all only have so much precious time. So, I did find some things. So, like, an overall, more general thing is, the writing style the overall writing style of a book can really make or break a book for me. Like if I can just tell like relatively early on that a book is just poorly written, poorly crafted, like I can't deal with it. Like I will probably read it, but if I can tell early on, I'm that this is a writing style, I'm like, oh, this feels very juvenile, this feels very poorly written, or whatever. For whatever reason, I'm personally thinking this is just badly written. This can ruin an entire book for me. Like a book can have great ideas, great characters, great world building. If it's written in a really bad, shitty way that makes me hate the words I'm looking at, that makes me hate the words I'm looking at on the page, then that's a deal breaker. Like, sorry, then the book's just not. No, it's just not gonna work. So that's sort of a general thing. The writing, which I don't think should be a hot take, right? But I personally, I know that some people are like, oh yeah, I don't mind like reading a book that's poorly written, like just for, calming down, just like a comfy read, to like turn my brain off or something. I can't, that doesn't work for me. Like, if a book is poorly written, I can't switch my brain off to be like, I'll just like go with the flow. Yeah, no, it's not that written that well, but just have fun. I can't do that. So yeah, that. If we go a bit more into detail, something else, especially for fantasy, is like illogical world building. Like, I know world building can't always be on the level of Tolkien, and I'm not asking that of anyone really, but if the world building is so superficial and very obviously illogical that if I only think about the world building for 3 seconds and it immediately crumbles in its logic, then I'm gonna scream. Like, the best example, because it's why I talk about it on the channel, is Fourth Wing with, they've been at war for several hundred years, they're in dire need of soldiers. What does the war school do? Kill off its potential soldiers. And that's the kind of thing where that makes no sense. That makes no sense. You're asking me to accept this. This is the whole point of the premise, and you're asking me to accept this, and this doesn't make sense. So this immediately, for me, would be like, yeah, no, this book doesn't work for me. Like, what are you even doing here? Number 10. What's a strong opinion you have about a book released within the last year? Whether it's overrated, underrated, or just a take you need to share. Okay, so my problem is I don't really read a lot of like current literature. I barely pay attention to like new releases. I just buy or read whatever I'm in the mood for right now. I'm not looking at like what's new right now. So this is gonna be, if you've been on my channel for a while, this is not gonna be a very obvious take. The Fourth Wing series sucks. And I can say that because the new book came out recently, so it is within the last year. Yeah, the Fourth Wing series, the Empyrean series as a whole, I find incredibly overrated, badly written, and it's very, if you're generous, it's very mediocre romantasy, which actually to me personally borderlines, it's just straight up garbage. It sounds harsh, but yeah, that I do not get the hype. I've never understood it. I'm doomed to experience this entire series because people like to hear me talk about it. But yeah, I do not get it, will never get it, and if you like this series, good for you, but I have a hard time understanding why. Question number 11. What do you look for in writing? What makes a book stand out to you? Is it prose style, themes, voice, structure, or something else? So I've made note of 2 things here that I would argue makes like what I look for in writing is that the writing style and the overall voice to me feels personal. Like, it doesn't have to be like super. It doesn't have to be the most unique thing in the world, the writing overall, but I love it when I get the feeling from the writing that I can tell that the author actually put some thought into it. That I can tell while reading a book, that I can tell that an author put actual thought and effort and passion into it. When I read a book, I get the feeling, oh hey, I bet the author had a lot of fun writing this. This is what I like. This is what I'm looking out for. I can genuinely tell someone really thought about what they're writing, what they put on the page. They put some thought and effort into the world they created, into the characters they created, and they try to present in the best way possible. That's what I'm looking out for, like for this feeling that I want writing to give me, to be like, hey, the author really wants me to care about the story they're telling. This is sort of what I'm looking out for. And a second, maybe more specific thing, good pacing. Because pacing is really a make it or break it for me. Because I think good pacing, like really good pacing, is incredibly hard to nail and like get down correctly, I think. And a book, honestly, to me, is great if it never makes me feel bored. Like, if there's never a point in the story where I'm like, oh, okay, can we move on now? Or it's like, oh, well, it was way too fast. If the pacing is good and I'm never bored, and I never feel like things are moving too fast, then that's excellent. Number 12. How do you decide what to read next? Do you plan ahead, mood read, or follow external factors like hype, recommendations, arcs? Or I just decide based on moods and vibes. Like, whenever I look for a new book to read, when I finish one, and then I just take a look at my TBR that I have at home, and then I just go with what I'm feeling like at the moment. This can change at any time. Sometimes I like read a book and then I'm like, oh, I want to read a book that's like within the same genre, so I go with the flow basically. But sometimes I'm like, oh, hey, I'm actually in the mood for like something completely different compared to what I've been reading before that. Sometimes you can argue I'm maybe influenced by what I'm into at the moment, just in general, not just books, but also like by just topics or movies or music that I'm into at the moment. For example, I've been listening to a lot of K-pop lately. Can attest to that. So I know that I really want to get more into Korean books now. So I've bought a bunch of Korean books recently because I've been listening to a lot of K-pop. So that's my mood at the moment. So that's probably what I'm going to get into next. So yeah, it's very much dependent on moods and vibes and what I'm into at the moment. Number 13. Where do you get inspiration for your booktube content? What sparks your video ideas? Other creators, trends, personal reading experiences? I don't really go out to look for inspiration per se. I'm really just influenced by what I'm reading at the moment. So I'm mostly inspired by my own reading experiences. Like whenever I read a book that really makes me feel like there is something I want to talk about here, I sit in front of the camera and talk to you. Like, I don't really have anything pre-planned most of the time. The only things that are sort of pre-planned are those longer book reviews that I do for you sometimes. But apart from that, I'm really just going with, hey, this is what I'm reading at the moment, and I just like to talk about that. And so it's really just dependent on what I'm reading at the moment and how it makes me feel. And I feel like if I feel like there's something I have to say about a book or a bookish topic that's been on my mind, I just sit in front of the camera and ramble. Question 14. If you could make any book go viral right now, what would it be? A book you think deserves more attention, and why? Okay, so I have talked about this book before because it was my favorite read of last year. So I'm going to mention it here again because I haven't really seen anyone talk about this more, which surprises me. I want to highlight Welcome to Hyunamdong Bookshop. So this was my favorite read last year. And like I said, I'm surprised that not more people are into it on BookTube. I've been talking about it because this is perfect for BookTube. This is a book about books. The main character runs a bookshop. It's perfect. Like, I really like this book because it really made me feel cozy. Like, this was one of the few books I've read in recent times where I was really looking forward to getting back into it as I was reading it. And it wasn't necessarily because it has like a thrilling story, because this is not a story-driven book. This is surprisingly enough a character-driven book. But the way the characters like live in their world, and you get to read about how daily life at the bookshop just commences, it just felt really like, it made me feel warm and taken care of. And whenever I picked up this book, I was looking forward to getting back into it because I wanted to hear about the stories of the people in the bookshop. And I honestly think BookTube would love this because it's about, a middle-aged woman who is divorced, just deciding to open up this bookshop, and then you read about her day-to-day life, how she deals with a bookshop. She looks for employees to run the cafe that she has in her bookshop. Then you get to read about how she organizes, readings or book clubs and all that. And you just get to read about the daily life of the people, of the woman who runs the bookshop, about her friends, about family members who come to visit her and all that. And this book also doesn't only manage to talk about, books, but it also manages to talk about, the economy, how the woman is able to run the bookshop, how book discussions work, how you talk to readers, how you talk to authors, how book clubs are organized, how the online book community works and how it influences the local book community. It's also about, just the working life in South Korea in general. So it also manages to address some socio-political themes because, she's divorced and she sort of does her own thing as a middle-aged woman, which is a bit more unusual in South Korea. And there's a young man who goes against the career wishes of his family and decides to work as a barista in the local bookshop. So it manages to talk about some socio-political themes and cultural themes as well that are important to many South Korean citizens. And so it manages to be very cozy and warm, but it also manages to actually make you think about some things, about working life, about working culture. So I honestly wish more people read this because it just made me feel comfortable. It's just a really, really comfortable read that made me feel seen, that made me feel safe, but it also made me think about some things. So it was a bit of a thinker and it was a bit of a feelings book as well. So I hope more people will pick this up in the future. And the final question, question 15. Who are some booktubers with reading tastes similar to you? So I would like to highlight the person I got this very tag from. My name is Marinez. I really love her analytical, enthusiastic nature when she reads books, and I think we have a very similar taste, which was especially apparent to me when I was reading Red Rising last year, and she was like the only one that I found like within like my bubble of booktube people that I watched who had the exact same opinions on the book as me, and I was like, oh, finally someone gets it. Like that's sort of the connection I had there when I watched the videos. Second person I would like to highlight is Elliot Brooks. And I think we have a very similar taste for the fantasy books we enjoy. And I also know that she has a second channel where she talks about manga. So that is pretty similar, that we both like fantasy books the most, but also tend to read like manga or graphic novels sometimes. So I like that as well. And I would also highlight the channel The Book Leo, because what I like about her is that I like her analyses that she does of specific books or bookish themes, and I often find myself very much agreeing with like her analyses and the well-researched points that she makes. And just overall, I think our reading tastes are quite similar in terms of, there's a bit of fantasy, but it's also a lot of literary fiction as well, and especially like in regards to how we analyze books, I think we have similar opinions. So yeah, those are the three channels I would highlight here. Okay, that's it from me for this book tag. As I said in the beginning, if you want to do this tag as well, feel free to do it. Do it over on your own channel. You can also answer some questions in the comments down below if you want. Don't forget to tag me and especially, of course, my name is Marinez and a friend who came up with this tag to make sure we're all seeing that and that we can all see each other's videos to see, hey, what are our reading tastes like? And maybe we are able to find some new people who we can talk about books with. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you're curious to see what I'm currently reading or what I'm reviewing, you can follow me on Storygraph or on Goodreads. Links for those profiles are in the description down below. If you have any comments or questions or whatever about the books I've been talking about here, drop something down in the comments below. As you know, I'm always curious to hear what you're thinking about the books I'm reading. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.